They rerouted their storm water straight onto my land. Didn't ask, didn't warn me, didn't even bother pretending it was temporary. And when I finally understood what they'd done, standing ankle-deep in muddy runoff that smelled like someone else's problem, I realized one of us was about to get a very expensive education. I lived just outside a small town in western Kentucky, the kind of place where folks still lift a hand off the steering wheel when they pass you on a two-lane road, even if they don't know your name. My place sits downhill from a subdivision that went up about 3 years ago along the ridge behind me. Briar Ridge Estates, big brick entrance, iron gates that don't actually close, a sign about community standards, like it's a country club instead of a cluster of vinyl siding and mortgages. I bought my land 15 years back. Back then it was open pasture, one tired red barn leaning like it had worked too many seasons, and enough space for a couple of horses and some quiet. I'd spent years doing construction in Louisville, saved what I could, and when my dad passed I used what he left me to buy something steady. Something that didn't talk back. You know what I mean? Land's honest. You treat it right, it treats you right. The lower pasture had always been the wettest part, sure, but it drained fine. Spring storms would hammer the tin roof all night, rain so loud it felt like the sky was emptying buckets, and by the next afternoon the soil would be firm again. My neighbor Walt, pushing 70, remembers when this whole area was tobacco fields, used to say that land was smarter than most people. Knows how to drink, he'd tell me, and knows when to let go. So when we got that week of rain last April, I wasn't worried. Gray skies that didn't lift, creek swelling but still in its banks. I kept the horses closer to the barn, tossed extra hay, figured we'd ride it out like always. But on the 6th morning I stepped outside and something felt wrong. The air had that swampy, sour smell, not clean rainwater, something heavier. I walked down toward the lower field, and my boots sank deeper than they should have. By the time I hit the fence line, I was standing in ankle-deep water. Not puddles, not soft patches. A wide, ugly sheet stretching across half the pasture. There was trash floating in it, plastic wrappers, cigarette butts, and this thin, oily sheen catching the light wrong. The grass where my horses usually grazed was flattened, already yellowing like it was suffocating. And the water was pressing right up toward the barn foundation. Not inside yet, but close enough that I could picture it seeping through concrete, soaking feed, warping what I'd spent years repairing. I just stood there with my hands on my hips, listening to the drip from the eaves. This wasn't normal. I'd seen worse storms. That's when I walked the fence line. The back edge of my property runs along a tall retaining wall that belongs to Briar Ridge. About halfway down, I saw it, a clean, pale circle of concrete punched straight through stone. Fresh. Too fresh. A pipe stuck out maybe a foot on my side, angled slightly downward, and beneath it the ground was gouged out like a miniature canyon. I crouched down and stared at it. 12 inches across, easy. Edges still sharp. Debris caught around the mouth like it had been working overtime. And then it clicked. They'd built a retention pond up there during Phase 2. I remembered the bulldozers, the hills scraped raw for months. I never paid much attention to what they were doing with runoff. Figured that was their business. Turns out it was now mine. Instead of designing drainage that kept water inside their boundaries, they'd punched a pipe through their wall and let gravity do the rest. And gravity led straight to my pasture. I felt that slow burn start in my chest. Not explosive, just steady heat. The kind that comes when you realize someone decided your property was the cheapest solution to their inconvenience. I called the property manager, Trent Holloway. Slick hair, pressed shirts, smile that never reached his eyes. I'd met him once at a county meeting. Briar Ridge Estates, he answered. Trent, this is Caleb Mercer. I own the pasture directly below your retaining wall. Pause. I'm looking at a brand new storm pipe sticking through that wall and dumping onto my land. Care to explain? Another pause. Then a sigh. Like I'd interrupted lunch. That's part of our updated drainage plan. We had to improve runoff flow from the retention basin. Improve it for who? I asked. The water has to go somewhere, Caleb. Your property sits at the lowest elevation. It's natural drainage. I actually laughed. Couldn't help it. A concrete pipe blasting thousands of gallons into my field is natural? It's within code. Did you get an easement from me? Silence. No, we didn't need one. That was the moment something shifted. It wasn't about rain anymore. It was about assumption. The quiet belief that because I lived downhill, because I didn't pay HOA dues, I was acceptable collateral damage. I went to the county office next morning, beige building, flickering lights, coffee machine older than me. Brought photos, timestamps, a little map of property lines. Denise at the counter frowned when she saw the pipe. They didn't file a modification tied to your parcel, she said. You can file a complaint. Inspector will be assigned. Might take weeks. Weeks. My field was underwater now. When I got home, Walt was leaning on my fence, chewing a toothpick. They do that without asking you, he said. Sure did. That ain't right. No, it's not. He looked at me sideways. You gonna let it stand? Here's the thing, I'm not a hothead. I don't go looking for fights. But I believe in lines. Literal ones like fences. And invisible ones like respect. That night I read my deed, every line. No easements granted. Then I read about Kentucky water law. There's this thing called the common enemy doctrine. Landowners can protect themselves from surface water, as long as they're not acting maliciously. Protect themselves. That stuck. So Friday, I ordered truckloads of dense clay-filled dirt. Called Walt about his backhoe. We built a berm along my fence line, 2 feet high, thick at the base, sloping back into my property so it wouldn't collapse. Entirely on my side. When we reached the pipe, I lined the berm with heavy plastic, stacked cinder blocks tight around the mouth. Didn't shove anything into their pipe, didn't cross their boundary. I just eliminated the low spot where their water had been spilling. If water came through now, it would hit compacted clay and reinforced block and have nowhere to go but back the way it came. For 2 days, nothing happened. Then Sunday afternoon, the sky darkened. I moved the horses into the barn. Rain started slow, then steady. Lightning flashed against that retaining wall. I walked halfway down the slope with a flashlight. Water was pouring from the pipe, slamming into the clay barrier, splashing back. At first it pooled at the base. Then it rose. Instead of spilling across my pasture, it pressed against the wall. I went back to the porch, sat in my wooden chair, and waited. There's a strange calm when you know you're within your rights, and the rest is physics. Sometime after midnight, I saw headlights moving along the ridge. Flashlights. Then the unmistakable whine of pumps kicking on. Water, when it can't go downhill, looks for another path. By morning, mist hung low. From my porch, I could see the retention pond up there swollen past its banks. Walking trail underwater. Tennis court edges shimmering. 3 houses had sump pumps running, hoses snaking across manicured lawns like panicked veins. Around 9, Trent's black SUV tore down the access road and stopped at my gate. He marched up my driveway. What did you do? He demanded. Morning to you too. You obstructed the drainage outlet. The pond's backing up. We've got basements taking water. I protected my property. You can't block engineered flow. I didn't block anything on your side. I built a berm on my land. His jaw tightened. You're causing damage. No, I said evenly. Your design is. Within an hour, 2 more board members showed up, including Patricia, the mailbox color enforcer. She started talking about community responsibility. Your actions affect all of us. Your actions affected me first, I said. They threatened legal action. What they didn't know was the county inspector had called me at 8. Denise must have pushed it through. By noon, a white county truck rolled up. Inspector Gregg walked the fence line, measured the pipe, asked for permit numbers. There was a pause, the kind that stretches too long. We're finalizing paperwork, Trent said. Gregg looked up slowly. Operational infrastructure requires approved modification permits, especially when altering runoff onto adjacent property. Silence. This installation appears to have been completed without proper authorization, Gregg said. Redirecting concentrated stormwater discharge onto neighboring property without easement is a violation. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Within 48 hours, emergency pumps were draining their pond. The HOA hired contractors. Word spread fast. Here's the twist I didn't expect. About a week later, a guy from one of the flooded houses knocked on my door. Mid-30s, tired eyes. My kid's playroom flooded, he said. Did you have to block it like that? I invited him onto the porch. I asked them to fix it, I told him. They said it was natural. He stared out at my pasture, mostly dry now. They told us the system was fully engineered. I'm sure parts of it were, I said. Just not the part that ended on my fence. He rubbed his forehead. And then he said something I hadn't considered. They never told us about the pipe. That hit different. It wasn't just me they'd cut out of the equation. It was their own homeowners. They gambled on my silence. Over the next 2 months, Briar Ridge spent close to $200,000 redesigning their drainage, tore up trails, installed underground piping that looped back into a reinforced basin within their boundary, added overflow controls. The concrete pipe pointing at my pasture was removed. Hole sealed. Stone faced like it never existed. My berm stayed. Not out of spite. As a reminder. By midsummer the pasture was green again. Horses grazing like nothing happened. Barn stayed dry through 2 more storms. But something in me changed. I used to think most conflicts were misunderstandings solved with conversation. Sometimes they are. Sometimes people just need clarity. Other times they need consequence. I don't hate the folks on that ridge. I don't wake up hoping their tennis courts crack further. But I do believe respect for boundaries isn't optional. Not in land, not in life. They assumed because I was one property, and they were dozens, I'd absorb the inconvenience. That I'd wait politely while my pasture drowned so their lawns stayed pristine. Maybe some people would've. Maybe some folks think I overreacted. So I'll ask you straight. If someone rerouted their problem onto your land, would you quietly accept it because it was easier? Or would you put your ground back where it belongs and let gravity sort out the rest? Was I protecting what was mine, or did I go too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a neighbor, or anyone who thought your boundaries were negotiable, share this story. Sometimes the line between right and wrong isn't drawn in ink. Sometimes it's drawn in clay.